Okay, so I'd like to maybe address something that I've been dealing with recently, and I think that it frames some very interesting ideas about the nature of the world, the nature of reality, how we can think about things and so on. Let me just kind of put this here. Um, I hope it's still audible. Okay, so I think what's very interesting is when we come up against science and so when we talk about science, when we talk about the processes of science, what we're really seeing is science is a way of studying the world. Science is a way of looking at the world, understanding the world. And in order for us to understand science and in order for us to make sense of the world, we have the processes of science. And science is necessary. And I think maybe the first place we should start with is um, let me kind of just make a few notes. So we have the definition, right? So when we consider the definition of science, science is an empirical, rational, testable, parsimonious, generalizable, tentative, rigorously evaluated statement, DRTPGTR. And okay, so science is empirical, right? The first job of science is that it describes the world that we're observing. um, Science is rational, so it follows a path, it follows a stage, point to point, right? We go from um, cause to effect or effect to cause, and we're trying to analyze it, we're trying to understand it, but in a very rational, step by step manner. Science is tentative. So when we have an understanding of the world, we are also inherently admitting to the fact that our understanding of science can change from point to point. We know something about, take for example, neuroscience today, and we're able to understand and analyze the world today. But maybe as we're going along, the nature of science changes. How we analyze the world today may not be the way in which we analyze the world tomorrow, simply because we have more information, we have better experimental design, and we're kind of able to see how science moves along the path that we set out. Okay, so science is empirical, science is rational, science is tentative. Okay, uh, science is um, parsimonious. So the idea of parsimony is that we're looking for the most coherent and at the same time the simplest understanding of the world. And this really forms our understanding of science. Okay, science is also generalizable, right? The fact that I know something um, means that I can apply this information, I can apply this understanding not just to um, the specific situation that we have in front of us, but the situation as we can apply it to several other um, how we apply it to other situations. We're able not just to apply it in a narrow context, but we're able to widen the context that we have, and that's how we kind of progress. So science is also, so as I said, ERTP, right? So science is parsimonious. Science is generalizable, science is tentative, and science is rigorously evaluated. So the idea here that we have is, in order for something to be passed as science, in order for us to say, well, this is the way that we're looking at the world, this is the way that we understand the world, it also has to be rigorously evaluated, not just by the standards of a single scientist, or not just by the standards of a single lab or a single unit or a single space, but that the science is also able to form a consensus. There are a number of individuals out there who are able to sort of sit, and figure things out and understand together that something is scientifically generated, something is scientifically understood, and that there is a consensus to how things work, right? And that's the um, key element of science. Um, Science is a method, really, and I think what we need to evaluate also, okay, just to kind of add some context, I'm a neuropsychologist, which means that I deal with the not just the way in which the brain works, the way in which the brain processes information, the way in which the brain allows us to act out in the world, but also the phenomena, the qualia, right? The way in which the phenomenon sort of manifest themselves, right? So one branch of neuropsychology, one branch of the neurosciences is what we call neurophenomenology, which is where we're thinking about how people are able to embody, enact, extend their experiences that they have in a very, very fascinating kind of manner, right? So neurophenomenology, right? So I think here we have a very clear distinction between two things. We have we have what is science as a method versus scientism, which is an attitude. Science is humble, scientism tends to be cocky, right? Scientism tends to assume that the entire world is based on nothing more than hardline rationality. Only when we are able to specifically point out that something is empirical, rational, testable, parsimonious, generalizable, tentative, and rigorously evaluated, can we say that something constitutes a science, right? But scientism is the attitude that there is nothing more than science. There is nothing more than this method, right? Science as a system tends to ask, right? And I think it's very important for us to understand where we come from with science, and a large uh, the large space of science is that it constitutes um, what Thomas Kuhn referred to as the scientific revolution, right? And so where he points out that there is a period of time where science begins asking new questions, science begins framing the world differently, but we don't have the technology or the innovation or the capacity to ask these questions correctly. Okay, so the first thing that we have is scientism tends or pretends rather to be a science, but it ends up just sort of flattering reality instead. Okay, so science is great for observing, testing, revising, falsifying, but scientism kind of takes that success and says, well, there's nothing more than just science's empire, right? If something can't be measured, then it must be irrelevant. And that's when things start sort of deteriorating and denigrating. Because what we see here, fundamentally, very interestingly, as neuroscientists, is that the human experience is often messy, subjective, relational, right? Things like pain, things like suffering, consciousness, identity, culture, right? These don't always reduce neatly, though we have very interesting systems of evaluation, right? Um, Science simply says, well, this is interesting, let's try and learn some more, and the rest we can kind of leave open. Scientism says we cannot possibly leave anything open, this is the end. There is only what we can observe. The other problem that we have with scientism is that scientism is a system that denies its own epistemic limits. Okay, individuals engaging with science, right? And again, I mean science as a method, right? Where we're observing, quantifying, you know, modeling, mapping out the world, is that we have an understanding that the framework is really fragile. It's not. It's very messy, right? And whenever we come up with contradictory findings, whenever we come up with incomplete findings, the model in itself is up for revision. Scientism, on the other hand, says that, or behaves rather, as though current science has explained everything and it only needs to mop up or eliminate the details rather than make space for new information. And what this leads to is overconfidence in the current models that we have, dismissal of other knowledge systems, treating metaphor, narratives, cultural knowledge as things that don't exist or inferior, that are childish, right? And assuming eventually that the scientific method is the only legitimate path to run, which in itself is an unscientific claim, right? You cannot possibly say that we will eliminate all these other systems of knowledge and you know try to figure out the world from there. And I think this is very interesting because what this idea here, especially the dismissal of knowledge systems, I think very fundamentally this raises a very interesting question. So we have the idea here that when we're looking at the world, when we're trying to examine the world, we come up with sort of three dimensions. We come up with a science, we come up with non-science, and we come up with pseudoscience, right? And here's where things get very interesting. So we have various fields of science, okay? We know the standards: biology, mathematics, chemistry, physics, geology, so on and so forth. We have things that are non-scientific. Okay, so we have entire fields of study that are non-scientific. So we have fields like occultology, demonology, um, astrology, right? These are fields that are non-scientific, which means that while they have models, the models are not inherently based on anything scientific. Okay, and then you have pseudoscience. So pseudoscience is basically the key to catch pseudoscience is that you must understand the mechanism of explanation, which is a tautology. So A kind of leads to B, and B leads back to A, and then A leads back to B, and then the cycle keeps going round and round. The other problem that we have is scientism collapses its meaning into mechanism. There's a lot of existential territory in science, uh, which is where we start examining things such as ethics, values, spirituality, religion, aesthetics, dignity, justice, right? And these are things that we cannot submit to lab tests, right? Trying to analyze them only through empirical methods shrinks them into total caricatures of themselves. And even if the mechanisms proposed are true, it doesn't constitute the whole story of science, right? So science describes, while scientism is fundamentally reductionist, right? I think those are some points that I'd like to make.